The Yellow Vests protest in France has crippled their tourism and a lot of their economy, and it's still going on today. You may not be aware, but the Yellow Vests protest was started when they put a tax on petrol in an attempt to reduce the amount of gas people were using. The idea is basically, if we want to fight climate change, we got to reduce the amount of gas people use, so we'll charge more for it. The problem is people need gas to live and work. Michael Bloomberg was recently on camera in a viral clip saying that taxing the poor is good because then they're less likely to spend money on things that will kill them. Because when you take the money away from the poor, they can't cause themselves harm. This is the mentality of the global elites. Unfortunately, it's the mentality of those who are trying to curb climate change. This is the future you can expect when they start implementing what can essentially be austerity in a sense, taking away the resources of the public because they don't like what the public is spending money on. Take a look at these photos. For those that are listening on the podcast, I'll just describe them. In one, there's what appears to be tear gas all around. It's a dreary sight with trash all through the streets, and a woman is holding a broken umbrella. Below, we see a man in a black mask, and there's smoke around him, which may be tear gas. Many people are covering their faces. In one, it's a red night sky with people marching. So let me just tell you this. These images of SWAT police, battles in the streets, going on for over a year now, is what you get when you implement social policies meant to stop this, to prevent climate change, like what Greta Thunberg has proposed. Recently, she said, change everything, complained about the colonial, racist, and patriarchal systems of oppression, and that fossil fuels are literally killing us. If we were to move in the direction she wanted us to, radical social policy, radical change, do you think that the average person is just going to say, okay, and just let these things happen overnight? Unfortunately, no. Now, I'll be the first to admit that presents us with a real crisis. Whether or not you're a believer in climate change, we do need to protect the environment. We need to make sure that we're protecting our air quality and our water quality. And so I typically take a step back from the more the more finished arguments, I should say, the more far out conclusions. I know climate change. Here's what I'm trying to say. People who believe in climate change definitively do. People who don't definitively don't. Let's move back away from all of that and ignore those conclusions, whether you believe it or not, and say this. If you both want something, what can we do to get there? What the left is proposing would be complete social breakdown and destruction, like what we're seeing in Paris. I mean, look, I respect the protesters insofar as they're willing to stand up for what they believe in and fight for their community. I do not respect those that are destroying things, starting fires, fighting people. But it's tough. It's really tough when you have a government telling you that they are simply going to levy a punitive tax against you because you're too stupid or because they think people shouldn't have a right to use a certain resource. Therein lies the big problem. What do? Check us out. More than 800,000 demonstrators marched on cities throughout France today, with railway workers, teachers, and hospital staff joining the largest strike in decades. Authorities in Paris barricaded the presidential palace and deployed some 6,000 police as activists, many in yellow vests, gathered for a major march aimed at forcing President Emmanuel Macron to abandon his pension reform plans. So this is literally an austerity protest. But I bring up the climate change stuff because the protests that have been plaguing France started with environmental concerns. Well, Donald Trump is staunchly opposed to this, but I don't think that's a solution either. I can't tell you what the solution is, but I can tell you that we're facing two big problems. If we do nothing, we, in my opinion, will see damage from climate change. The world is not going to end in 12 years. The oceans are not going to sweep away Miami. That's all fear-mongering insanity. I believe people like Greta Thunberg, AOC, are trying to scare you, to shock you into thinking, oh, we better act now. Because in their minds, well, they're probably just ignorant. But there are a lot of people pushing this narrative, and I think it's because in their mind, they think, if I tell you the truth, you won't respond. If I tell you we have 100 or 200 years, they'll say, so what? But we do need to act now. I think it's better to just tell people the truth. Listen, man, we can't keep polluting the air, right? We had a problem in the late 1800s of horse poop in the streets. A lot of people didn't care, but we were concerned there would eventually be too much. So you know what we did? We invented something new. Cars. Now, cars and other fossil fuel factories and plants produce a lot of carbon in the atmosphere, which can destabilize the bioecology or like the balance of nature and the chemicals and everything in the air. I don't think I need to lie to anybody and claim the world's going to end to make that an issue. And I think by lying and screeching the end is nigh, you actually push people away into thinking you're nuts. So if I said to you, we shouldn't be polluting, right? Like, hey, let's have clean water. Everybody would agree. There's not one person that's going to be like, no clean water, let's pollute more. No, everybody wants clean water. We just disagree on the right way to do it. So when you have these extremists like Greta Thunberg now talking about colonialism and patriarchy, it's like, dude, you immediately lost every single person you need to convince. So I'll tell you what I think. I think global warming is a serious issue. I also think, what's the point of solving the problem if it results in a year of civil unrest and fighting in the streets? You can't lie to people this way. We need alternatives. So we're addicted to fossil fuels because it's a high energy output tool we use. This petroleum, it does wonders. It really does. You know, you think back to several thousand years ago. Humans would consume food and convert that into chemical energy to produce something. Eventually, we started using beasts of burden. The animals would exert force in a more efficient way, requiring less energy from us, freeing up our time. Eventually, we used wood, fire, steam, etc. And now we're at the point we have many different forms of energy, but the best we have in terms of acquiring the best return on investment, fossil fuels. There's a downside to this. We are pumping out a ton of carbon and pollutants into our atmosphere. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. But I don't need to sit here and screech the end is nigh. That's stupid. I don't want civil unrest to break down all of human civilization. So we need to think about what we do. First, when you start screeching the world is going to end like Greta Thunberg does, you end up with a bunch of people on the right saying, count me out, you guys have lost it. So the government steps in and says, we're going to impose a tax. And you end up with scenes like this. These people don't care. These people are trying to live and survive, and they need access to fuels that facilitate our existence. I have a solution, one I've proposed many times. Instead of punishing the poor, taxing the poor, and screeching the end is nigh, why don't we just say, hey guys, whether you're concerned or not, what can we do to actually make your life better? Look at what Tesla is doing with electric cars and self-driving cars, man. At least he's doing something. Let's read a little bit more about what's going on in France, so we can get some context here. Because I will state this is an austerity protest, but you know, because of the yellow vest things, they say President Trump cut short his trip to London on Wednesday, branding the Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau two-faced after he joked about the time Trump had taken during a press conference. Macron desperately scrambled out of the diplomatic blunder, telling reporters, "I am not going to comment on stolen videos. That video wasn't supposed to be filmed in that room." Busted. Isn't it funny how they're mocking Trump? And we have as Jim Cramer says, I'll cover this more in the next video coming up at 4 p.m. But Jim Cramer says, best numbers of our lives. Meanwhile, Canada's losing jobs. France is rocked by austerity and environmental protests. Who are we supposed to criticize here? Trump for talking poorly? For being arrogant and narcissistic? I'll stop and say for sure, but I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to have to criticize you for the civil unrest and the breakdown in your country. These people have these extreme views on how they should deal with these things, and it always seems to come back to what Michael Bloomberg said about them being smarter than the poor people. You look at someone like Greta Thunberg, who is the epitome of white privilege. If I had to describe what white privilege was to somebody, I just say, and you should do this too. Look, there's a lot of people who probably don't get the concept. Let me explain it to you. Greta Thunberg is white privilege incarnate. She is a young, arrogant, spoiled, narcissistic child who's very ignorant. I'm not saying these things to be mean to her, to disrespect her. I'm stating these as facts. She is very arrogant. She says, you have stolen my childhood while she traverses the globe meeting with world leaders. Yeah, that's arrogant, extremely, and narcissistic. Your childhood was stolen? What did you want to do, go to the moon? You're doing what some young people only ever dream of. Being an international celebrity, getting to meet world leaders and dictate policy? Wow. Talk about arrogant narcissism. We took your childhood away? She's also very ignorant. She doesn't understand what she's talking about. So she is the epitome of what you could describe as white privilege. She comes from a very wealthy country, Sweden, very high GDP per capita. She has, as far as I understand, a decently wealthy living situation. We've seen photos of the wealth she lives in. She gets to reduce her carbon footprint by taking a yacht across the ocean. Well, isn't fast. It's certainly expensive. So while I don't attribute her wealth to the fact that she's white, When people talk about how there's white privilege, people listen to you more, they respect your opinions, you're more likely to have access to wealth. That's Greta Thunberg. So if I was ever going to explain to somebody white privilege, I'd say, oh, like Greta, 16, refuses to go to school because of climate change, and she hasn't been at school in over a year. Could you imagine being a kid and telling your parents, I don't want to go to school, and them saying, why? And you say, oh, because people eat meat. And they were like, okay, once people stop eating meat, you can go back to school. What kid wouldn't make up some dumb reason not to go to school? So now you have this funny circumstance where Greta Thunberg actually leaves school and then starts complaining about change in the world. But you know what, man? Let me tell you something. I'm a milquetoast fence sitter. You've heard me say that before. And it's because I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. I think I read a lot. I think I know a lot. Most people think they're smart. But I don't think I'm the smartest person in the world. So I typically reserve the right, for hard facts and solutions to come in before I assert what should or shouldn't be done. I'm a high school dropout. If you want to hold that against me, so be it. And then you have to also, if you want to claim that I'm just a stupid high school dropout, contend with the fact that I'm straight up saying, I don't know the solutions. Maybe that's because I didn't go to school or college. Okay. At least I have the guts to say, honestly, I'm not 100% convinced. I don't know. I want to wait for more hard evidence and propose compromises that I think would work for most people. Greta, on the other hand, stopped going to school and then complains she knows exactly what needs to be done. She then complains that her childhood was stolen from her. This is what you get. So let me ask you something. Here's a conundrum. Do you want, if you believe in these things that AOC and Greta say about the end of the world, 8 to 10 years now, the oceans are going to sweep away Miami. What do you want? Do you want civil unrest and riots, fires in the streets and the total breakdown of society? And once that happens, it's going to be hard to get medicine and food. Or do you want to, just let people keep burning fossil fuels, and then as time goes on, the world ends? The challenge I see here, we know for a fact there will be mass civil unrest if we start implementing harsh taxes and policies to curb people's access to resources, like they did in France for a year now. I also believe if we do nothing and keep moving in this direction, we will be damaging our environment to an extreme detriment. I also recognize, as I've stated many times, I don't expect to convince people on the right who don't believe in climate change that we should do something about it. I do believe that we can find a compromise that works for everybody. I also believe that if we continually address the issue in a fair and honest way and incentivize financially, better living and better technology, we avoid all of this. The problem I see right now is not climate change deniers, not at all. Because you can go to someone who doesn't believe in climate change and say, I'll tell you what, you don't believe in climate change? What if I gave you $100 to ride your bike instead of, taking the bus? Somebody might be like, dude, $100? Imagine if we created financial incentives to do something that made more sense. I'm not talking about punitive taxes. I'm talking about tax breaks. I think that's an excellent path forward. What if I said, here's what we're going to do. We are going to offer up credits for electric cars if you buy that instead. Guess what? We do that. We literally have a system that's trying to incentivize people to say, we don't care how you feel about the environment. We're just going to tell you what. We think it's an issue. This car's better for you. How would you like? Let me tell you something. Some of you might say you'd rather have a Ford F-150, and that makes sense. It's a pickup truck. You might need it for work. But let's talk about luxury living. Let's talk about you just want to go hang out with your friends. What would you rather drive in? A self-driving Tesla with that big sunroof? Like, have you ever seen the inside of a Tesla? They're amazing. Or, like a standard model a Honda Civic. I was going to say Toyota Corolla, and then I mixed them up. Honda Civic with, standard, manual transmission or automatic. I'll tell you what, man. If I had to choose, man, I'd want a Tesla, dude. That'd be so cool. Those cars are awesome. They're expensive, though. So we offer tax incentives for this. The problem I see is the zealots. They believe the world is ending, so they're literally causing this city to burn down. If they just, you know what, man, the world isn't ending, and that's the big problem. So here I am. I worked for nonprofits. I've worked for the environment. I've fought for the environment. And I learned very simply, you do not win by screeching the end is nigh. You win by a handshake saying, hey, man, 10 seconds. It's this simple. Keep your lights off. Don't forget to turn off your lights. You know why? Not because of the environment. Because it'll save you money on your electric bill, right? How many people leave their lights on, flush their toilets too much, use ineffective light bulbs? All of that costs you more money, dude. I don't need to talk to you about reducing emissions. I need to talk to you about living more efficiently so you can afford more stuff. Go have fun with your friends, get some drinks at the bar. I'll tell you what, man, how much money would you save if you turned the lights off when you didn't need it? How many dads said, why are the lights on? How many dads have said, who left the door open? The AC's on. We're not air conditioning the world. That's the mentality we need to say. Save resources for you and your family. That will be better for the environment. It all comes down to us as individuals making that choice, not putting taxes on the resources we need to go to work in the first place. But I'll leave it there. You get the point. These protests in France are austerity. These photos are pretty awesome, by the way. Like, this is a man in a clown mask waves a smoke bomb as he takes part in a demonstration of protest against the French pension overhauls in Marseille today. But it's I know it's not the same thing. I'm not trying to conflate austerity protests with environment protests. But this is kind of like, I think it really is one of the most important battles right now politically. How we can create a clean and sustainable future if not everyone agrees on what the problem is. I tell you what, I would rather argue with 100 climate change deniers than 100 climate change zealots. Because the climate change zealots are going to say, we demand you ban gasoline. And I'm going to be like, stop. Okay, that's crazy. We can't just do that. 100 climate change deniers are going to be like, I don't think it's a big problem. And I say, but what if we still incentivize you to save money? People would be like, well, we'll talk about it. It's like, I can tell somebody, hey, we have a way that you can save money for your family and do right by the environment. People are going to say yes to that. But if you say, I'm going to ban gasoline, they're going to be like, no. And that's why it's harder to talk to the zealots, because they're too entrenched. And I'm telling you this, man, as somebody who actually worked for nonprofits and fought for the environment. I have spoken to the zealots. You can't win with them. And I've spoken to deniers who will compromise if there's mutual benefit. And there is. But telling people the world is going to end solves nothing. So I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. youtube.com/Timcast, and I will see you all there.